Welcome back to the Revive Your Health podcast. I am your host, Dr. Shannon, and I'm here with Dr. Brandon and Dr. Ethan, my awesome co-hosts. So, how are you guys doing today?
Good. Thanks for having us, Dr. Shannon.
Yeah,
Couldn't be better. Good to be back.
Good.
You guys are newly married.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
How was the wedding? How was the honeymoon?
It was amazing. I mean,
Yeah?
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
So,
Well, last time we talked on the podcast, you guys weren't married yet, but now
yes,
you're married.
it was the week before our
Exactly.
wedding.
That's
Yep.
cool.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep.
It was,
Fresh back from Mexico, brought the mustache with me.
Yes, I know.
She asked me to have it, so
I
That's why
did.
you guys
I
are
was
sitting
like-
next to each other this time.
right.
I was like,
Yeah,
you know what?
that's
They're
true.
married now. I'll sit on the other side.
Yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep, yep.
exactly.
Absolutely.
No, but it was amazing. But we're happy to be back and just kind of getting back into routine and not having to stress about planning a wedding anymore, right?
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Wedding planning now. I'm done hearing about that. So.
I know.
good
and
to
the
be done.
stash
Good
looks
to be done.
good. I might be a little bit biased, but So
See, there's hope for the stashes out there, guys.
yeah, there we go. It's
Well,
coming back.
with Chris Bumstead on the
It's coming back. But okay, so today we're actually going to talk about autoimmune. And I feel like it's a really hot topic right now. So I'm excited about it. But I guess before we get into it, I just kind of want to talk about like what is autoimmune. And autoimmune is the autoreactive lymphocytes that, basically attack each other, and everything that's supposed to keep them at bay fail, which in layman's terms is just like the immune system begins to attack itself. So there's a ton of, causes that could kind of kickstart and trigger autoimmune disease. And I feel like it's kind of a growing epidemic in our country, especially because we've actually seen like a huge rise in developed countries having autoimmunity. So, let's just get into it. So I know we were talking about just like environmental stressors and how that can cause autoimmune disease. I want to hear from Dr. Ethan first about epigenetics and what that has to do with autoimmunity.
So the way I like to think about epigenetics is in the early 2000s, around the time that I was fairly young going through school with my twin brother, there's all these twin studies that came out. We actually got a letter in the mail that said, participate in our twin study. And what that was is they were trying to, and we were not identical twins, so we ultimately didn't meet the criteria for the study. But what they were doing is they were taking identical twins and they were following them as like a cohort study over the period of like 10, 15 years. And they wanted to see, because those twins were ultimately not going to live the same lives, but they wanted to look at their like gene transcription factors and like their cells and take like small biopsies and things and just see ultimately how those twins were growing and if they were remaining similar or if epigenetics had a play or if they were starting to look different. Epigenetics is essentially the word epigenetics, above genetics. It's how your body changes at the DNA level as you grow and get older. And there's things we can do to grow and age well and grow and age poorly. So epigenetics is a good thing or can be a bad thing. So basically, like if you look at two twins and one's a chain smoker their entire life, and then one works out regularly, eats healthy, takes care of themselves. Those two people may be the same age, but one's going to look like they've aged 20 years past the other. Mm-hmm. That's epigenetics. When you look at it, when you have something to look at there, it's one twin that's been a chain smoker, one twin that's lived their life, to the best in their best sense of what they believe wellness and health is. So, how that can occur is in our diet, okay, and then through exercise and lifestyle as well. Basically, what's happening is there's this process called methylation, and if you're eating really bad foods, and if you're not exercising and your lifestyle is very poor, you don't methylate well. What is methylation? It's basically where your body has tags on all of your cells and everything and your DNA, and your body can read that and replicate healthy cells. It's like Braille for your body to read. Mm-hmm. When you treat your body poorly, that methylation process gets all jumbled up, the lettering gets all screwed up, your body can't read what's supposed to happen, And so then all kinds of stuff starts to occur. Your body doesn't replicate cells correctly. Cancer can pop up. You start getting gray hair fairly early. You start balding. You start having hormonal processes that are not occurring very well. So that would be a poor representation, or a good representation of poor epigenetic change. Yeah. Okay.
So you say it's like the expression.
It's the expression.
The expression of the gene, not necessarily the gene itself.
Correct.
Like you're not born with bad genes.
It's the way your body reads what's supposed to happen, because proteins tag every cell in your body and tell your body, hey, do this or do that, or replicate these cells, or hey, my liver needs repaired, make more healthy liver cells and stem cells as you get older too and as you grow. So that process can be interrupted just by how you live your life, and it's shown on the individual. I mean, we all know somebody who's 30 years old, but you'd say, oh my gosh, I thought that person was 45. Yeah. That's somebody who does not methylate well because of how they live their life. And then ultimately, the way their genes are being expressed and read by their body is bad. So again, but it's somebody who ages well is somebody who methylates well, i.e. somebody who eats healthy, exercises, does all the right things. And I just use those two terms, but there's many, many things you can do to improve methylation. Okay. And epigenetics, the new big kind of realm right now is, can epigenetics be passed on from a parent to their kid? Like, can that person improve their genes so that when they have a kid, that kid is set up for success with better like phenotypic or your genes that are expressed, which they are showing that there is some influence, but it's still in the early stages. So it was just kind of scary to think about that you could already put your kid kind of a step behind just by the way you treat your own body. So, that might give people a bigger push as far as understanding epigenetics and how they can pass that on to their kid. But again, when you're born, even if you're kind of a step behind, even if there's a lot of studies that come out and that is true, there's a lot of things you can do to improve methylation, which is the good news. You're not doomed because, epigenetics, your parents failed and now they're having a kid and they didn't treat themselves right. That's not going to permanently damage you. You can improve methylation, and the earlier you can do that, the better. So,
yes, you talk about like it's funny you say that because I just read something that this generation of children will be the first generation that don't outlive their parents. And some would say, well, it's because their genes are bad. But then I would say that potentially the parents of those children didn't take care of themselves. And so therefore some of those genetic predispositions or the methylation ability of those children go down. So it's not necessarily that like, hey, we were just all born sick and weak, bad genes cause bad health, but it's this generational poor lifestyle, whatever, that is creating kids with, learning disabilities and asthma and, autism is through the roof. So, and all these are a lack of methylation. So we all are exposed to the same types of toxins or whatever. How can someone be able to get sick and the other person not? The ability for that person to be able to detox effectively, and that, methylation gene, right, that's in your body, you can turn it on or you can turn it off, right? So, talk about that a little bit. Like, I always heard that with epigenetics, it's like genes are like a gun, right? You pull the trigger, right? And you can either, shoot a blank or you can shoot a bullet. And so that trigger pull is a good decision or a bad decision, right? The apple or the donut, exercise or not, horrible, oxidative stress and food. So yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah, a couple of the genes off the top of my head, that like the BRCA1 gene or a K. There's a whole list of 30 of them, and to most people, those genes aren't going to mean much. To us, I mean, we understand, but you can alter all of those, and you can turn certain genes off and certain genes on and off. And I don't think people really understand that. You are with what you're born with and how you're designed, but the way you live your life is going to determine a lot of that gene expression.
Well, is that like, the whole, the breast cancer, is it the BRCA1?
BRCA2,
BRCA2, where it's like a lot of women are like, well, I've got that gene, so I'm going to go cut my breast off.
Correct, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like Angelina Jolie did that, right? And when that started happening, I was like, oh my goodness.
That's literally a methylation process that is just off the chain,
right? And so it's
essentially,
yeah. So it's like well, now we don't necessarily need to go doing that. Now we can change how that gene is expressed, shut it down, and you're not going to develop. It's just not like a death sentence.
Well, I think now more than ever, it's super important to kind of talk about epigenetics because it really comes down to also like the stressors that are triggering those genes. And I feel like now kids especially are growing up in one of like the most toxic load environments and stress to our bodies. So not only just like diets, but also just kind of overall like stress and competition and like all of that stuff.
Oh yeah,
and emotional stress like can alter cytokine profile, obviously triggering those like antigenic properties and causing more likelihood for autoimmune. And that directly correlates to what you were saying as far as epigenetics kind of being that trigger and all of the stressors and environmental like issues that are kind of going on affect it really heavily. So
yeah, I mean, autoimmune
it's scary.
Is your body's direct representation and expression of poor methylation processes and creation of B and T lymphocytes, that's your immune system cells. Those are your white blood cells, and they're being replicated at an ungodly rate. And so poor methylation decreases, like you have a cap at the end of your DNA called a telomere. That telomere length decreases with poor methylation, decreases over time very quickly. That's going to determine how quick you age. So if you're not methylating well, if you're not living a healthy lifestyle in various aspects, that telomere length and those caps become very thin and short. Those telomeres have to split in half constantly to make new cells in the process of making new cells. So if those caps are being destroyed and you're not methylating well, then ultimately that's when you get cells that replicate and aren't normal cells. They become cancer cells. Yeah. So and B and T lymphocytes that were designed to attack foreign invading disease and boost and ultimately is your immunity, that becomes your worst enemy and attacks itself, which would be an autoimmune condition. And all autoimmune disease essentially is your body's attacking itself and its tissues, and there's all different names for autoimmune conditions. Sarcoidosis, you have Sjogren's, you have rheumatoid arthritis,
cancer.
Correct. Yeah. So we have all of these conditions. The conditions are mainly just named after, they have all random names, but it's named after what tissue it attacks in the body.
Yeah, so let's kind of talk about what are the warning signs for autoimmune disease, and because not everybody knows what organs function and like do and all that stuff. So like, what are some type of symptoms that you feel like you see all the time in practice, or just in general, or maybe you've experienced in your life that are like triggers for autoimmune disease?
I would say thyroid dysfunction is a huge indicator. Low energy, skin. I would say that when an individual has a skin issue, whether it be psoriasis or some type of a skin issue. We've got a dermatologist that's out there to, put every single type of cortisone cream on that. But really the skin is the main or the biggest detoxification organ in the body. And so if you've got unhealthy skin, that's an issue that you're not detoxifying properly. Teeth, energy, hair falling out, gut dysfunction. Like, we'll talk about this a little bit later in the show when it comes to nutrition, but the gut is a huge problem. So just not effective bowel movements, or I have too many bowel movements, or I don't have any bowel movements at all. Like your poop, is kind of a great resource to look at and say, man, that don't look normal. Well, if your poop's not normal, then your body is not breaking down nutrients effectively. So those are just some of the things that I see. I mean, you guys can add into.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you touched on a decent amount, like that fatigue associated with thyroid issues and like that brain fog that I feel like almost every woman in their like 30s through 50s kind of talk about. And it's just like,
I think, those are warning signs. And then kind of going back to some of the genetics, like we use genetics as like a crutch, right? Like and I think it frustrates me so bad because yes, genetics do play a role, but they're not your they're not your death sentence. So you're 40 years old and you wake up one day and all of a sudden, boom, my thyroid sucks, my hair's falling out, I can't lose weight, my skin's horrible, I've lost my sex drive. Oh, I just turned 40. What you're saying is that it has nothing to do with 40. You were sick at 20, correct, but you just never ever were able to detoxify properly. And so the warning signs that we see nowadays, especially over the last, I would say over the last 5 years in practice, it's tripled because of the amount of stress, because of, just the amount of emotional stress that they put on an individual. And then when you're emotionally stressed, you don't want to work out. You don't want to eat broccoli. Right, you choose the donut over the apple when you're stressed. Let's be honest. We're spending way too much time in front of the TV. We're not getting outside. We're not getting proper sunlight. I mean, we talked about that, with the sleep workshop. I mean, it is really difficult to get sunlight nowadays, right? I mean, and it's going to be even more difficult in Ohio because it's like, so you got to really work to be able to do the things that are going to be necessary to begin to change this expression of that. And you better watch it because in the medical community, they ride the gene train. And people love to, I guess, seek out people that will agree with what they're thinking, right? Like, I'm sick, I'm overweight because of my genes. I have this because of my genes. Oh, great. Well, I can't control that. Yep. So take this. No.
That's just passive coping.
Well, yeah. Yes.
It's,
yes.
Like you said, it's the gene crutch, right?
Right. Obesity is genetic.
It's my genetics. Yeah.
But this is the rough thing about what we do. Yeah. And also the thing that I love is that, listen, you have a choice. You can change these things. Skin problems, gut problems, thyroid problems, cancer. Like these are all created things. And we're living right now when October is like Cancer Awareness Month. So everything is, just outside in, right? So what we're talking about today is that your body has a natural ability to heal. Genes are not your death sentence. They can be controlled through epigenetics. Some of the warning signs that we see are that. Yeah. I mean, it's all good news. You may not like what we're saying, but like at the same time, it's like we're also, I always tell people, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to tell you the truth. So that way it's like, because that can eventually begin to set you free if you have the right, path at which to choose. So.
Well, it's the hard journey. It's not the kind of easy way out, like you were saying. I mean, I even just, for example, like when you were talking about like some skin issues being like an autoimmune warning sign, like I've been to like tons of dermatologists because like I have like rosacea, which is a skin autoimmune disease, and dermatologists will just be like, oh, well, your dad has it, you're really fair skinned, and here's like 3 different creams that'll kind of help you out, and an antibiotic. Don't forget that. Yeah. And that there's no guarantee it's really going to help you. So it's all about kind of taking a little bit of a different route, because just with whatever autoimmune disease you have, there's just, there's no cure for it. You're just going to be living with it for the rest of your life. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to. You just have to do the hard work to figure some things out and what might be causing that attack on your own immune system.
Well, and what the medical community will say is, let's turn down the volume on your immune system. Let's give you immunosuppressants. Let's give you prednisone, which is probably one of the most prescribed anythings ever. Just prednisone like candy, which isn't going to change a dang thing, because you have to go through cycles of prednisone to, as soon as your immune system ramps up, we're going to kill it with prednisone. It's going to ramp up. Now we kill it with prednisone again. And the systemic effects of prednisone outweighs the systemic effects of autoimmune. And I mean, really all you have to focus on is improving your methylation, improving, certain habits and things in your life, and you can start to make huge changes. I don't think people understand that. So
yeah, I don't think we really, when you talk about the warning signs of it, but this is good too, because we got a foundation, right? Like autoimmune is not genetic per se. It's a methylation issue, which is caused by environmental and stresses at which we have control over. The warning signs, but one of the biggest warning things I say we see as a chiropractor is just achy and inflamed joints. Yeah, like my knees are falling apart. How do I have degeneration of my spine? Well, there's an inflammatory process that happens within your body, And you know, in our office when they come in, you know, we talk about nutrition, we talk about detoxification. Hey, come to 5 Essentials class, learn how to eat, learn how to take proper supplementation, learn how to change your lifestyle. Well, why would I want to do that? Like my back hurts. Well, your back hurts because yes, there are bones that are shifted, but yet you're basically putting that process 10x because of the inflammatory processes that are happening within your body. Itis, like any type of rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis, itis means inflammation. Yeah. And inflammation, according to the National Institute of Health, is the key playing factor in every single chronic disease known to mankind. And inflammation is a methylation problem. It is a, you know, so it all kind of comes back to how do we begin to do that process? So maybe now that we have a good idea what the warning signs are, like what autoimmune is, and like, okay, so it's not genetic. You know, sorry for some of you that would love to have that as like, what's genetic? So I'm good. Yeah. Let's kind of maybe go into like, okay, so what are some of the big factors, nutrition, exercise, and then, you know, chiropractic? Because I think those are the big three. I mean, we could probably sit here for 5 hours talking about all these different things, but let's just start with nutrition. Okay. You know, what would you guys say, you know, is one of the biggest things that we could begin to hit on there? You know, because nutrition's a big thing right now. It's like, well, I got keto, I've got paleo, I've got the Mediterranean diet, I've got carnivore now. Like, what is the biggest thing that we need to have somebody focus on that's got autoimmune? And just off the top of my head, I think regardless of what it is that you're doing, you got to think gut.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely. And I mean, I was just kind of looking into this a little bit further as well. And on top of all the factors that we talked about that can trigger autoimmunity, you know, a lot of people just have that like typical standard American diet, right? And like all the, yes, it is. And the additives in our food nowadays and like everything that's like in our food and just the toxins in the environment, but I'm going to focus a little bit more on food now. It can increase the like epithelial barrier and those tight junctions and ultimately cause that leaky gut syndrome that we hear all the time. And so like leaky gut can in turn kind of cause some of that autoimmune to be expressed. And how do we fix that? But the first step I would say definitely through nutrition. And what I've seen mostly is, yes, there's tons of things like all those diets out there that can help. And the biggest one right now is carnivore. So I'll touch a little bit on that in a moment. But research is actually saying starting with an elimination diet to kind of see what might be triggering the symptomatology. And then B, not jumping into something so crazy restrictive like the carnivore diet immediately, because it's actually can be a little bit of a stressor on your body. So doing something maybe like the autoimmune paleo or like the Mediterranean diet, which is high anti-inflammatory with a lot of like omega-3s and stuff, can be a good option in the beginning. And then if you want to try further healing and go a little bit deeper, then doing some more like low carb type of diet can help with some of the symptoms. But it can be actually in the beginning a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I think it's important to just not jump into something. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I think it's important to just not jump into something and be like, well, because somebody else is doing that, like I'm going to do it. You know, autoimmune is very individual. So we talked about this term dysbiosis or increased intestinal permeability, leaky gut. You know, an autoimmune, if you have autoimmune, then it's very, very important to focus on the gut, right? So, you know, some people that eat carnivore, they're like, I haven't had a bowel movement in 4 days, you know, because your gut has a hard time breaking down meat, right? Hey, I've done keto, but when I do keto, I'm going to the bathroom all over the place because you're basically sensitive to dairy. So the point is that dysbiosis is where, you know, your gut lining or your intestinal lining, it has this kind of flora. It's like a shag carpet, right? And you know, really those microvilli can absorb good things and then kind of swift away the bad things. You talked about gap junctions, right? Well, you know, someone's like, well, do I have those? Well, if you have leaky gut or if you have an autoimmune condition, you most likely have a gut problem. But the point is that you have these tight junctions. If your gut is healthy, then the gut lining should be super tight. But if you have gap junctions or you have these like gaps in between these in your gut lining, basically those big massive protein molecules can go right through the gut without any basically stopping them. It goes right through the bloodstream, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and that's where we get this systemic inflammatory process. So, hey, I've been doing the carnivore diet or the keto diet or something, and my knees are just massively inflamed. I had Jet's Pizza the other night, and my knees blew up. Or whatever. Yes, Jet's Pizza is not a great thing to eat, but more importantly, what it did within your body and how it crossed the blood-brain barrier and created systemic inflammation. So we have to make sure that whatever nutritional path that we're following or that we're going to talk about, it has to be friendly to the gut. And we're in this kind of like Instagram, kind of like, hey, this guy is like doing the carnivore and he looks amazing, so I'm going to try a carnivore. But autoimmune is way deeper than that. It's very individual specific, and I would even say maybe not in this show, but we will begin to talk about individual testing. And that's why individual gut, blood, stool, urine, saliva testing to figure out, hey, Dr. Ethan has he's got a massive amounts of toxic bacteria. We need to kill those off. We need to rebuild this type of bacteria to make sure that his gut is going to be able to absorb. And, when your gut's healthy, your brain's healthy, your systemic inflammation's healthy, everything is healthier, and this is kind of the root, key to that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is that carnivore is a viable option for systemic inflammation and managing systemic inflammation, but if you don't have the gut microflora and the biome to support that diet, and if you're not methylating correctly, you're going to have some issues starting that diet. So there's things that need taken care of prior, but we have to fix the dysfunction, and then we can start to kind of add those things in and control that systemic inflammation. So it's a process.
Yeah, if you put 100 people in a room, I think we could all understand. I'm not saying like I mean, personally, I think that paleo makes sense to me, right? I mean, I also think that we're hunters and gatherers. Right, so we went out and we hunted, and then we feasted on an animal. But hunting isn't always killing. So sometimes you didn't get to kill anything. So what did you have to eat off of? You had to eat off of, stored up berries and nuts and seeds and maybe whatever. I don't know. But the point is that it makes sense to me. Yeah. I mean, keto makes sense to me, because it's all about blood sugar regulation, which you'll talk about. But the point is that if I put 100 people in a room, you'll talk. Not all people had great results on keto. Not all people had great results on carnivore, and it just so happens that the reason why those individuals didn't have great results is probably because they have gut dysfunction. So,
yep. And something I always find interesting is that my great grandparents, I always look to them because they were married for 74 years, and they mowed the grass past the age of 90.
My grandfather just turned 80, and he was chopping wood.
And which is, right? That's so cool. You look like a lumberjack over there, Dr. B. I love it.
Representing my pops.
There you go. Yeah. Word to pops there. But something I always wondered was, oh my gosh, my great grandparents, their diet wasn't perfect, and they didn't do, their form of exercise was, I'm going to go mow the grass almost every day, and I'm going to move. I'm going to constantly move. But what they ate at the table didn't necessarily reflect perfect health, but their meal portions and sizes were controlled, and they did not overload on carbohydrate. And I think what people need to understand about like insulin, and we talk about diabetes and dysfunction in that realm, you have to be able to control your insulin levels on every cell in your body, and especially in your capillary bed and in your cardiovascular system. You have these receptors called AGE receptors, advanced glycolytic end product receptors, and those largely remain inactive. Those receptor sites were originally kind of designed in your body from a genetics and genomics standpoint to be able to be markers where your body could mark a cell for it to be destroyed when it was the end of the cell's life cycle. But those AGE receptors also can accept environmental toxins. And when you overload, and a big one is when you overload your body, when your pancreas is pumping out insulin, Insulin in itself has a high affinity for those age receptors. So if you're just flooding your system with insulin, you're eating these huge meals, your blood sugar spiking, those age receptors are saturated, you start to get, an increased aging process. You stop methylating well. You start, again, aging, which is kind of a funny thing. It's advanced glycolytic end products, but it's also makes you look like you're aging. So age is for short. But the interesting thing is that your cardiovascular system starts to break down. You start to look older and more decrepit. And in diabetic patients, you start to get big ulcers. Those ulcers are formed partly because of the age receptor saturation. And all that is that your body's just flooding the system with insulin. So as long as if we're focusing on gut health and all of the dysbiosis and really correcting the systemic inflammation, making sure we're not flooding our system with insulin, we have a really good shot at being very, very healthy internally, absorbing all of our nutrients and ultimately repairing that methylation process. That's when healing starts to occur, when those several processes I mentioned are corrected and they start to actually reverse. You can correct all of that, but it's a real nasty stuff when it's off on the loose there.
I think it's really interesting because this is all scientifically proven.
It's all out there. Anybody can find that information.
You can go in any kind of main journal and Google autoimmune and gut health and insulin sugar, and you'll get 20 articles about the effects of. Huge database. But when you look at the typical American diet, or you look at potentially what someone would get advice from a typical like dietitian or something like that, it's like, hey, make sure you have your whole grains, make sure you eat your bowl of Quaker oatmeal in the morning. Make sure you don't eat too much meat. It's really interesting. So like I guess give me and you guys can kind of chime on this. Like, what would you say would be a great day of eating for somebody who is trying to be gut friendly, but also try to minimize sugar?
I would say, again, it goes kind of back to a little bit of the dependent for your healing journey and what's kind of going on.
Well, let's just say my gut was really good. My gut was, doing okay. I mean, I got tested. Everything is good. I don't have a whole lot of allergies per se or sensitivities to anything. I'm just looking for a nutritional kind of day that would minimize glucose or minimize insulin spikes and really set me up for a good anti-autoimmune.
I would say...
What would breakfast look like?
Quality protein.
Okay.
I'm really big on that, and we talked about it a little bit over at our...
Like your quality protein.
I do. I mean, it's... people say, like, in research that Americans overeat on protein, but I don't think that's the case. I think they just overeat on fast food, which people think is high in protein, and then if you look at, like, RDA or whatever the recommendations for protein, it's like a lot less than what's actually optimal. So going back to my original point, like organic cage-free eggs, antibiotic-free like chicken sausage or something, just to kind of start the day to make you feel fuller and help with muscle protein synthesis and stuff. So high protein in the morning. You can pair it with, a fruit that might be a little lower on the glycemic index, and then like a fat source. But usually, with an egg, there's chest sausage that has your fat source. Yeah. A mixed meal is what's going to kind of like keep things steady, because you don't want too high on, you don't want complete just only protein, because then you could go into like the gluconeogenesis and like all that type of stuff. Sure. So like kind of keeping it protein high, moderate-ish carbohydrates. If you're going to eat them in the morning. We talked a lot about that too earlier in our sleep workshop, just kind of helping with energy levels and like circadian rhythms, stuff like that. So starting off the morning with protein and some carbs and fats, and then moving into just kind of overall keeping that model through the day and ending your food at a good time of day. So we talked about that again, just ending your food a little bit earlier so that helps with sleep and recovery and all those things, and whatever you have to add to it.
So, what Dr. Shannon is saying there is mixed meals, good quality protein source, good quality fat. Dietary cholesterol is not the demon that it's made to be. It's not. Dietary cholesterol has nothing to do with your blood cholesterol levels and your profile. It's just
the inflammation of cholesterol.
Correct. That's absolutely.
So if we keep inflammation down and we keep our gut healthy, then even if our cholesterol is 220, you're not going to die of a heart attack.
Right.
So
Absolutely. So, and then we're managing our portion sizes, so we're not having these massive, King Arthur at the round table meals and feasts, spiking our insulin and to the point where we just want to go to bed, because that's just the systemic effects of those massive portions and only having a couple meals a day is just not it. So I would say definitely avoid that. The good thing about having a quality protein source, I mean, we want it to be antibiotic free. We want it to be, grass fed, free range, all the words there, to avoid those toxins, right? But also a good quality protein source and protein in general has massive amounts of vitamin B12 and folate as well. And if you look at the actual word, we call it folate, B12, but B12 is actually methylcobalamin and in its smallest metabolite form, and then also methylfolate. That word, there's that word again, methyl. So if you're eating a quality protein source, you're getting quality nutrients that are going to help with methylation. Right. So if we're not eating protein, if we're not getting quality sources of B12 and folate, you're already one step behind. That's just, protein's good. I mean, you need protein for rebuilding processes and muscle building properties and to prevent age-related muscle loss, but you're also getting these micronutrients that are helping your cellular health, that are helping you age correctly. I think that's kind of some lost information that people need to understand. It's not just about get my protein in and get big. It's, no, I need my protein so I can methylate correctly and so I can age properly. It's huge.
I think that's the difference. Sometimes you get, this isn't like, a tear down on, the vegetarian or vegan part, but I think there's something about, wild caught, wild venison, elk in the mountains steak versus B12 from GNC. So living off of vegetables all day, which I don't believe that's what we're programmed to do, but there's something about what you just said about methylation and why it is that, individuals that are, eating a plant-based diet all the time, but not having good, healthy protein sources from a natural product versus your body's going to recognize that.
Yeah. And you're getting a bunch of phytoestrogens, and phytoestrogens just, basically come from plants. And we need that, more of that, testosterone building or hormone regulating enzymes, micronutrients that are only found in, animal meat, preferably wild caught, cage free, grass fed, antibiotic free. Right. So that's important. And, we're not telling everybody if you're a vegan, this is the end of you and this is the end of everything. We're just talking about kind of how to optimize things, right? It would be absolutely optimal to get those nutrients from an animal source, but
yeah. So we talked a lot about nutrition. Let's kind of talk about a couple other things that we can do to help regulate someone that has autoimmune disease. And exercise is a big portion of that. And according to research, you see a lot of exercise being beneficial to help with regulating inflammatory markers with people that have autoimmune disease. Do I think that people that suffer from autoimmune disease need to be like marathoners or like professional athletes? Not necessarily, because I think, again, it kind of comes into, do we want to raise those inflammation markers too high in someone that already has a lot of dysregulation? What are you guys' thoughts on all that?
So exercise is proven with countless studies to regulate gene expression. So that's just a given. So gene expression right away. Again, the ORA-K gene, BRCA1, all of those that we could mention, controls your insulin levels, blood glucose, calms all that down. It brings glucose into the cell. It makes your cells a little bit more there's a higher affinity for insulin to bind to the cell when you exercise. That's why exercise is so good for diabetics, but it's also good for everybody in general just to regulate that process. you're increasing healthy metabolic rate metabolism. You're promoting healthy cell replication, can increase telomere length. Those caps we're talking about that can change, your risk of cancer and quick aging. So, I mean, and you could go on, but exercise in general and just moving, we were not designed to sit at a desk all day or to just sleep the day away. We need to be up moving around for that exact reason. Our DNA, our bodies need movement to regulate gene expression. Our DNA depends on movement.
Oh, yeah.
It does.
Yeah. Bottom line is that any kind of exercise, I mean, it's just exercise. Like if you were just like the simple things that we're talking about today, right? Number one, genes don't control your health. It's all about your choice, and, take care of your gut, eat good quality food, and move. I mean, those are things that you can take to the bank. Yeah. You don't really need to think a whole lot about it. Like, should I or should I not? Yes. Every single day. Like exercise is always going to be good. Now the specifics of it, I think that we should, maybe touch base on, yes, exercise is great. Like if you're not exercising at all, go for a 30-minute walk. Specifically, maybe walk fast for a minute and slow for 30 seconds. Fast for a minute, get your heart rate up, get your heart rate down, just crush blood sugar levels that way. But I think specifically with exercise, and I've seen this in the clinic with individuals that have full-blown autoimmune, their bodies are just loaded with cortisol. Their bodies are just absolutely maxed out, stressed out. I don't know necessarily if it would be great for that female or that male to get up at 4:30 in the morning to be at the 5 a.m. CrossFit gym and to maximize and redline, fall on the ground and die type of exercise. Now, I was a world-class CrossFit athlete. I mean, I went to the CrossFit Games. Like, I'm not anti that. I'm just saying that could be bad for that individual, because now we're talking specifics on, what is that person's physiology going to need? And I think sometimes when you're in full-blown fight or flight autoimmune, you might just need to tone it down a little bit, right? So go to the gym, lift weights, but don't be afraid to take a break in between sets. I mean, more of a functional bodybuilding approach versus just max out, high intensity, fall on the ground and die.
Yeah, I think for most people, starting to do something, starting to reverse that process. And exercise is one component. There's a lot of other things that need to change. We've covered diet. We've covered, why that's important. But diet and exercise change the same process. That methylation, it all comes back to that methylation process, how your body's reading your DNA and expressing genes. And again, not overdoing the exercise, because too much of a good thing can be a bad thing, right? So just starting that process, starting to do those interval walks, starting to just move your body to start to reverse that process. I mean, you could be consistent a month. If you go from no movement, lying in bed or just sitting on the couch all day eating Cheeto Puffs to, I'm going to replace my Cheeto Puffs for, healthier snack, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm getting up and I'm moving. Well, then a month, I mean, you're not going to realize how bad you were until you realize how good you're feeling at that point.
You just lived off of Chomp Sticks and Granny Smith apples and took a walk every day?
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah,
I mean, I could take you to the bank right now. I'll put money on it. You probably lose 20, right? Just Chomp Sticks and Granny Smith apples, right? It's it's cheap, and it's like, dude, you're going to be in great shape. So
and I think that's the biggest thing, is people don't understand how bad off they are until they start to change things and feel how good it is to feel good again, or just feel good at all. Just because they got in that rhythm of being unwell.
You guys haven't been in practice that long, but I have got it quite a bit. And in the years that I've been in practice, Dr. B, I kind of hate you. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, I just can't do the things I used to do before. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? They're like, yeah, I used to be able to eat this, but now when I eat it, I felt like crap over the weekend. Thank you. I'm like, you're welcome. Because your body is like at a different set point. Your body's homeostasis is different. That's why chiropractic, we'll kind of transition to chiropractic, but that's why chiropractic is cool. Why people say, well, man, I feel like I need to be adjusted. It's not because chiropractic is addictive and we're trying to get everybody to just, it's like, oh, once you go to a chiropractor, you always have to go. It's because when your body experiences a different level of health, the moment that you dip out of that is when you're like, oh crap, like I need to be adjusted. Man, like I used to be able to eat Jets Pizza, but I had that. And I was like, I don't know when it was. It was probably like a few years ago or something like that. And a buddy of mine was like, I dare you to get Burger King. And I was like, oh, and so it was just like a joke. So I, got like a Burger King, and I had like 2 bites of it. And I'm like, I can't even eat this. Like I literally feel like garbage. And they're like, are you serious? And I'm like, when your body becomes so clean and your gut becomes so clean and you put that trash back into it, it's almost like you just don't want to do it.
Yeah, because you literally have different gut flora,
Yeah.
different strands of gut flora that have adapted to eat other things and not that. Whereas the society we live in now, our gut flora, not necessarily us, but us as a society, our gut flora is adapted to eating Burger King and those other. So we have to change that. That needs change. And then you go and you try to eat those things. You try to drink a Coke or you try to eat a burger from Burger King, and it just ruins you. It's just
I think it's
no
actually
bueno.
funny though, because I feel like, I don't know, maybe you can definitely relate. Family specifically will be like, what do you mean you don't want to go out and like get X, Y, or Z? Like, I don't know. It just makes me laugh.
Why can't they have cotton candy? I'm like,
People
listen,
think we're probably like crazy. I know like parents and stuff are just like laugh a little bit.
a real simple trick that when you start having kids and you don't want anybody to feed them anything, just be like, they're allergic to that. Like that's, if you're a parent out there and you're like, how do I get my family to get on board with the fact that I have an autoimmune, and this is the thing too, if you have an autoimmune disease, guess what? Your kids are going to eat that way too. Right? Your kids aren't going to get cheese sticks and cheese puffs and chicken nuggets while you're eating grass-fed filet mignon and broccoli. Like, get your kids to eat that too. But when you're out traveling for the Thanksgiving and stuff like that, it's like, what's the easiest way for everybody around me to get on board with this new lifestyle that I have because I'm reversing autoimmune? We're allergic to it. The moment that you use that, because you're sensitive to it, but just use allergic, and they're like, oh, okay, that's great. We'll just make gluten-free mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
So it's easy. So, oh yeah. Transitioning into chiropractic as we, kind of wrap up. We're talking about, fight or flight, right? So, most individuals that are in autoimmune, they're kind of like in this fight or flight. They're not breaking down food appropriately, because when you're in fight or flight and you're running away from a tiger and you're in chronic stress, like who cares about breaking down your food? Who cares about finding a mate? Who cares about digesting your food appropriately? Who cares about sleep? You're basically running for your life. And I think the research that I have read when it comes to like, why is chiropractic effective in this piece? And I say piece because I can't tell you that, somebody comes into chiropractic, they're 50 pounds overweight, that they've got gut dysbiosis, they're living on McDonald's every single day, they're not getting any sleep, and if I just adjust you, then all your problems are going to go away. I'm just going to tell you right now, like I'm not going to say that. But chiropractic is a massive piece of the puzzle, because it is what's going to allow your autonomic nervous system to be able to come into balance. So you've got two different nervous systems in your body. You've got an autonomic nervous system that is composed of your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. Your sympathetic is your fight or flight response, which when you're in autoimmune, that's kind of where you're at. And then you've got your parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest. And healing happens in the middle. And chiropractic, I believe, and what research proves, just happens to be one of the best ways to be able to balance those two systems. So ways that we see people in sympathetic fight or flight, right? We take x-rays, we do different types of postural scans, and someone could lose that natural curvature in the spine. Like when you take an x-ray of a spine, we want to see this nice C-shaped curve, looks like a banana, because you're not in fight or flight. Your head's not 4 feet in front of your body, right? Mm-hmm. Your head's over top of your shoulders, you're relaxed, you've got good breathing, you've got good sleep. But an individual that has lost that natural lordosis in the spine is somebody that's living in fight or flight. So from a chiropractic standpoint, obviously, we adjust the spine, free up that interference, and then giving the spine rehabilitation to actually relax the spinal cord and begin to put that arc in. So because that's going to allow balance within that system. I'm just reading an article that I shared with you guys earlier. This was in the Journal of Inflammation in 2018. The medical world's way of reducing inflammation and balancing sympathetics is the FDA has now approved a vagus nerve stimulator, right? So when you come into a chiropractic office, we talk a lot about the brainstem. And I don't think there's any profession in the world that can manage and put an individual into balance and have a healthier brainstem than in chiropractic. No other profession can do that, because we can actually adjust and remove that stress. But what they're doing is they're actually putting in vagal nerve stimulators at the base of individual skulls. And what they're finding is that when they stimulate this area of the spine, it actually decreases inflammation throughout the body. They're curing epilepsy, depression, rheumatoid arthritis, and gut problems. I'm just here to tell you that that's what we do when we adjust you. Whenever you're interfered or you've got what we call subluxation, you're in fight or flight, we adjust that particular area and someone's like, man, I feel so much lighter. I feel so much better. And what that's doing is that's decreasing that inflammation load and it's taking you out of fight or flight and putting you into balance. And then when we do that, repetitively, and we restore those natural curvatures to the spine, and we combine that with good quality movement and exercises and learning how to fire your butt and hamstrings, for goodness sake, because nobody has a butt these days. Like they're just like that. We're just like in a no butt syndrome. It's like old man butt, right? And then it's like, everybody's eating, sugar and, cornflakes and whatever. Like we got to change that. And so, but the nervous system, you can be in fight or flight and have massive amounts of pressure in your brainstem, and your spine can be completely jacked up from a car accident, or maybe you were emotionally beaten as a child. I mean, all these different things that can cause the spine to shift. And then you have the best diet in the world, you have the best exercise program, and you have all these supplements, but yet the circuit breaker that controls everything else is still irritated. That's why chiropractic is so important. So.
Yeah, and autoimmune in itself is dysregulation of that system, and autoimmune most certainly will, with systemic inflammation, will put you in a state of fight or flight internally. I mean, it just will. And I don't know about you, but I would much rather have an adjustment than to have a device installed into my brainstem.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
But the FDA approved that, and it approved the Twinkie, by the way. So it goes to tell you about the FDA.
You can get your device installed, then you can go get you a Twinkie right after,
right. And hit the button
as a reward.
No, it's good. It's good. Man. So anything you guys have to add on chiropractic?
Man, I think you covered it pretty well in terms of like how your body responds and like everything you need to regulate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just say, everything we talked about as far as diet, exercise, knowledge is power. We're talking about all the sciencey stuff, and it's really, I think it's really important for people to be educated and understand that, because you have to understand how things work to want to make a change. So I think it's really good, but also understanding that an adjustment, if we're correcting all this other stuff lifestyle wise, the adjustment is regulating all of that. Yeah. It's the net that's kind of pulling everything in together and keeping it there. It's regulating the body and the nervous system, and without that, things can sort of fall apart. But most certainly, if we're trying to make changes and maybe there's still some areas we're lacking in, an adjustment can kind of help keep that at bay while we're wrangling in the rest of that.
Well, it's like this amazing high performance engine with like the best tires and the best paint job, and like, man, the interior's sweet and the doors kind of like suicide up. But like the computer system is trash.
Yeah, you accidentally put diesel in it, and it's just not. It's going to crawl.
What you're thinking about here. I mean, when someone would be like, "Well, I don't need chiropractic. Like, I have an autoimmune condition, I have cancer, I have diabetes." That's why when someone comes in the office, they're like, "Can you help with that?" Absolutely, because we're talking about the nervous system, which regulates everything that's going on. But you can have a Lamborghini, whatever. You can have the most awesome car in the world, best paint job, best tires, everything, but the computer system is broken, and that's where chiropractic kind of fills the gap with those things. And this is why, we love doing what we're doing, because we're chiropractors, but then people are like, well, I'm down 30 pounds. I don't have to have my CPAP machine anymore. I'm off my cholesterol medications. Oh yeah. My thyroid is normalized. And chiropractic was kind of the one of those pieces of the puzzle that allowed all that to happen. And you said knowledge is power. And I think we should just maybe close with that mindset is probably, at all the essentials that we talk about. If you don't believe that your body can heal, and you live the lies of, hey, it's your genetics, you can't change it, it's your family history, your mom had it, your dad had it, your grandpa had it, so guess what? Just live with it. Don't be a victim. Like that is the worst advice you could ever, and just you got to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people that are gonna help push you slowly up the hill in the right direction. And that's never an easy process. But what's even a worse process is getting to the end, and like you don't get to enjoy the things that you work so hard for, right? I mean, how many people do we see 70 plus years old, I've got millions in the bank, and all of a sudden it's like, I got a heart attack, or I got cancer, or, something bad happens. So, if your kid has ear infections, if your kid has skin problems, if you're 12 years old and you've got debilitating migraines, or, you're 25 and you feel like you're falling apart from brain fog, like at 40 or 50, like these are, it's serious now, but don't hesitate. Like don't wait. Find root cause and get to the cause of it. So
I mean, the only thing certain in life is death, and ultimately, like, how do you want to get there?
Yeah.
Do you want to get there with terrible autoimmune condition, systemic inflammation, life ending a little bit earlier than it should, or do you want to get there kind of living your best life and your best version of yourself? Really, I mean, that's what it comes down to. Yeah. So, and everybody's capable of that. I think people can understand that. Get educated. The changes can be made. So,
absolutely,
good.
Yeah.
Close us out, Doc.
All right. Thank you for joining us today. So that was our first part on autoimmune, and I think the next time we come on the podcast, we're actually going to talk a little bit further on some testing for autoimmune conditions. So just kind of getting to that root cause and seeing, hey, what's going on? So. Yeah, join us next time for our next episode. Thank you guys so much.
Go ahead and smash that subscribe button and share this information with somebody who's close to you, far from health. You just never know how it could change somebody's life. See you guys next week.